Hello,
Okay.
everybody. Welcome back to the Compass Online's podcast. So, here with me today is Benji Fields. So, he is a researcher who has been studying extraterrestrial life. Benji, I guess, could you tell us just a little bit about your history with how you got into this field and what are you doing right now?
Yeah, so I have a kind of lifelong fascination with this question, right? Of are we alone in the universe? And with looking for signs of intelligence out there in the galaxy. I grew up reading a lot of science fiction and stuff, and so that kind of influenced me to get into this. And I really wanted to do my undergraduate thesis project in this field. And I kind of just reached out to this guy at Berkeley SETI, the Berkeley SETI Center, Dan Wertheimer, and I was like, "Hey, do you have any project ideas?" And he was like, "Yeah, you can look for lasers in archived observations." And I was like, "That's really cool." So, kind of just ran with it. Um, so the specific project that I do, or that I'm working on right now, and that I've been working on for the past 2 years, is I've scanned about 2,821 stars for lasers. The idea being, right, that let's say we're in basically a very heavily populated galaxy, and there's many different alien civilizations trying to talk to each other. If they were doing that via laser, which is one of the best ways that we know to kind of get information from point A to point B, and the Earth happened to cross the path of one of those beams, it would show up in the spectrum of the star we're looking at as an unexplained spike of energy, right? Now, a lot of things have to kind of line up for that to be possible because the aliens have to be transmitting at the right time. The Earth has to be crossing the beam at the right time. The beam has to be aimed in the right direction. Um, but again, if the galaxy is heavily populated enough, um, then we should eventually intercept something. And so my question was, did we already intercept something? And is it just lurking in data that we already collected for another purpose? So I was using this instrument called HARPS, which is high accuracy radial planet searcher. And what that does is it looks for really subtle Doppler shifts in stars' light that tells you that the star is wobbling. And from there, you know that there's a planet orbiting it. So traditionally, this instrument looks for planets. It does not look for intelligent aliens on those planet beaming signals. So, in other words, most of the people who analyze this data, if there were spikes due to lasers, would not have noticed them. So, I decided to go back through and see. Um, and yeah, so that's one of the main things I've been working on in this field. I'm also a research affiliate with the Galileo project at Harvard, which is another effort kind of in this area, more to do with the so-called phenomenon of UAPs and seeing if we can get more reliable scientific observations of those. That's kind of its own conversation, though.
Yeah, that's super fascinating. And just to clarify for our viewers, you're 23, right? You just graduated from college this past year with your bachelor's degree. Is that correct?
25, 25, yeah.
25?
Yep, yep,
All
yep.
right. So at 25, you have done all of this research on extraterrestrial life. You are involved with a Harvard project, a UC-Berkeley project. You were just featured by the SETI Institute, which could you explain the SETI Institute to people really
Yeah,
quickly?
so the SETI Institute is one of the largest and most well-established centers for this kind of research of looking for life in the universe. And so a lot of what they do is looking for radio signals from intelligent life. And that's kind of the original SETI experiment that was started in the 1960s. But these days, they're actually expanding to similar territory to what I'm doing, where they're looking for lasers. And then they also have a lot of people in the field of astrobiology. So people who are looking into things like planetary habitability. What does it take for life to evolve in the first place? What does it take for life to be able to thrive on a planet? What conditions does a planet need? That kind of thing. And it's all one of the things about the SETI Institute is it's all based on a thing called the Drake equation, which basically is a way of trying to estimate how many intelligent communicating civilizations there are in the galaxy. And there's a bunch of different factors like the number of habitable planets, the fraction of those planets that develop life, the fraction of that life that develops intelligence, etc. Some of those values we know better than others. But the SETI Institute tries to basically take each value in that equation and try try to put some numbers on it.
Do they have a general estimate right now? How much
There's
intelligent life
so
is
many
there?
different ones. There's so many different ones. I mean, there's some very optimistic estimates that say that there's millions of civilizations in our galaxy. And then there's some that, say that, maybe there's a civilization for every 10 galaxies. I'm personally in the more optimistic camp. I think that I think that we have every reason to think that intelligent life is abundant throughout the universe. Um, because I think that whatever happened here can easily happen somewhere else.
I guess,
But
what
that's
do
just
you
my
think that the
opinion.
implications of that would be for humanity here? Just as somebody who
Well,
I assume that you enjoy thinking about all of the different theories and
motivates, yeah, it motivates what I do. Absolutely. Um, I mean, I think the biggest implication, and this actually ties into somewhat what you do as an environmentalist, is that it forces us to change our anthropocentric bias of that we are sort of the pinnacle of creation. And as the only technological life on Earth, we also see ourselves as the only technological life in the universe. And that makes the universe basically ours for the taking, or so the saying goes. This kind of upends that thinking because it forces you to say, no, we're not the only technological life out there. So the universe is not necessarily ours for the taking, and we're not necessarily the pinnacle of creation. So, you can extend that to a lot of different aspects of human life that we take for granted, like, for example, how we treat the planet, right? Like, it forces us to see ourselves as part of a larger picture rather than the pinnacle of that picture. And I think that's really important and valuable. There's also the possibility that we start communicating with these extraterrestrials, right? In which case, if they actually can tell us, if there's any kind of actual dialogue, then one can only imagine the kind of knowledge we could gain from a society that evolved under a different sun. I mean, it'd be incredible. So, yeah.
oh,
Also,
absolutely.
I think it forces us to see ourselves as Earthlings rather than as Americans or Russians or Japanese or whatever. It forces us to. It puts nationalism in a very different context because it means that we're one species out of many, as opposed to um, a bunch of different nations. Um, so I think that's one other paradigm shift that I hope this kind of research begins to get people thinking about.
Yeah, that would be really interesting. And I guess sort of what I'm getting out of this is that you're saying that within this field, even though it's a very STEM heavy field, it sort of has implications on a lot of other facets of society, like psychology, philosophy, just how we think about life in general. So that'll be really interesting to see if there's any more progress within this field and like some concrete evidence. But I guess what I'm now curious about is also, I know that you are an ambassador for NASA. So tell me about that a little bit. Like, how did you get that opportunity? What do you do for NASA?
Um, yeah, so I haven't been as active with that lately because the mission that I was an ambassador for has actually launched. But that was the Lucy mission or that was the name of the spacecraft. It was named Lucy. And it was named Lucy after the first Australopithecus fossil because that told us about human origins. And in the same way, the Lucy mission is trying to figure out the origins of the solar system. And so they're going to some of these asteroids that are like primordial remnants of when the solar system started to form. Um, and um, essentially, my role in that was I was sort of there to do public presentations about the mission to different groups and basically just help communicate that mission's goals to the public, um, right? Because if science is just for the ivory tower, then it's not really for anyone, right? So you want to take what you know in science and share it with the population at large. And so yeah, that's what I was doing. And then I was actually at Cape Canaveral for the launch and operating a booth there and talking to people and stuff. But it hasn't been as active since the spacecraft has actually taken off and started its mission. But yeah, in the lead up to that, I was doing a lot of that.
That's incredible. And that's so interesting. I know here at the Compass, we try to do a similar thing sort of with science communication, and we're working on creating more of that to share, especially climate change research with people.
Yeah,
So what are
that's
some of your
important.
tips for people when they're just trying to communicate concepts within science to the general population? Because that's
Yeah.
always a tricky thing to do.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think the main thing is don't be condescending and don't assume that people don't know, because the public is, I think, a lot smarter than a lot of people in science give them credit for. And I think that too often science communicators talk down to people and it turns people off and it makes people think that scientists are unapproachable and they're in this ivory tower and they're basically just it makes it so that I think the scientific method is in a way very similar to common sense because um, really everyone uses the scientific method every day in different ways. You're always trying to empirically figure out everything around you through your own observations. And that's all science is at the end of the day, There's no, secret priest class of scientists that sits in some arcane dungeon getting science from the science gods or whatever. It's people trying to figure out the world around them. And that's, I think, actually a universal thing. So I think that's an important aspect of it. I think showing science as an iterative process of getting at the truth rather than just a set of received facts is very important and something that I think is missing from the science communication. That a lot of it that's going on right now is that too often, it seems like it's being transmitted as this definite body of knowledge rather than a body of knowledge that constantly evolves. And I think that you can bring the public along for that evolution, if that makes sense. The other thing I would say too, and this is especially relevant with something like climate change, is when it comes to people who deny science, right? That's a very tricky thing to deal with. And I think it's important to try to actually give those people sort of logical explanations of why, give them the basis for the actual science rather than just saying, "Oh, that's stupid," because if you don't try to engage, basically you have to make them question their own anti-scientific beliefs. And I think that's very important, especially with something like climate change, is just, if you meet a climate denier, get them to question their denial a little bit. Um,
How often do you come across people who are trying to deny the science that you're working on?
um, Not terribly often. I think that most people, the majority of people that I interact with, actually think that we are not alone in the universe. That's more the common view of most people. I think that a couple of times I've interacted with like flat earthers, which was an interesting experience. Um,
Yeah, I
and
know there's always those times whenever you're wandering around on like a university campus, and there will be the guy that comes to set up the big posters with all of these weird in-depth explanations about no, the planet is actually secretly flat, and here's all of this fake evidence. And sure, you might have been in a plane, but actually this was all fake. Yeah, that's always a great moment.
yeah, yeah. I mean, one time I had an Uber driver who was a flat earther, and I pointed out to him that he was using a global positioning system to navigate. And I don't know, he just kind of shrugged that off and was like, "No, it's not from satellites. It's from drones that are inside of the dome over the flat Earth." And I don't know. One time though, I was successful because another time I met a flat earther and I actually convinced him to meet me in a park to look through my telescope so that he could see that the other planets like Saturn and Jupiter are actually round. Um, because he was not convinced of that.
I'm sort of wondering, like, how do people get to that point?
I think it boils down to, I think it's a similar mechanism to climate deniers, where it boils down to wanting to basically do any mental gymnastics to back up an existing belief, whether or not reality actually confirms it. And I think the thing that's interesting about flat earthers, that I think is kind of a teachable thing, is that in my experience, they're not stupid people. They're not dumb. They simply have decided to take whatever mental, intellectual resources they have and put all of it into justifying this one belief. And that's not really, it's not stupidity. I think it's a mistake to call these people stupid. It's extreme confirmation bias and extreme lack of any willingness to be wrong about your belief.
Yeah,
Um,
certainly. And there are so many lies that all of us tell ourselves every single day. So it's just another type of
it's
belief.
part of being
And
human.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like we all have to have certain beliefs that, I mean, who can actually guarantee what's true and what's not? And that's always changing as well. Uh, and even just our
Yeah.
human
Well,
perception, our brains will never be capable of fully realizing everything around us.
our view of reality is always going to be incomplete, and science is just about sort of building a map of the universe that is as true as we can make it. But the map is not the territory at the end of the day. You just make a better and better map. But that doesn't mean that the map is completely wrong, right? And so that's where I think some people kind of will misstep, is they'll think, oh, the map is not the territory, therefore there is no map. There's definitely a map. It's just we're always working on improving it and bringing in more and more knowledge to get it better and better. So yeah, that's the thing about science. It's never over. It's always the adventure continues, you know?
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. And then I guess one of my last questions is, so with all of these opportunities that you've already had by this age, how were you able to obtain some of those? So say that there are high school students or young people who are interested in delving into some more of these theoretical fields or looking at some of these programs. Like, how have you been able to achieve what you have already?
I would say the thing that I did is I, had things that I was very curious about and very excited about, and things that I really wanted to kind of dive into. And I more or less just kind of, I mean, a lot of it wasn't seeking out existing opportunities. It was kind of just creating them for myself. Like, for example, my thesis project, um, it pretty much came about because as I was approaching senior year, I wanted to do a thesis, and I was like, oh, I know what I could do a thesis on. I know it's always fascinated me. It's the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, right? So, you know, then I just shot off an email to someone who's a specialist in that field and he gave me a really good project idea. And then I just kind of took it and ran, and that's how I think you do it. I don't think that you have to always compete with other people for an existing opportunity. I think you can oftentimes just create your own thing out of thin air. And then it's great because you're not, I think it for me, it's been less about trying to excel at something that other people are trying to do and then out compete them and be better than them or anything like that. It's been more about just finding what I'm curious about and creating my own sort of new thing out of that, right? Because if you try to grow your garden in a dense forest, there's a lot of roots you got to compete with. So try growing it in a desert, you know. And I'm not an ecologist, so that could be a completely ridiculous statement, and it probably is. But in a less literal sense, try to find something that no one else is really doing, or and try to find something that is not such a heavily populated field, and there you can make the greatest impact. I mean, there aren't that many scientists looking for intelligent life. It's a very small field. It's a very small niche. So me as a measly little undergraduate was able to make a real contribution to it, because it wasn't already so populated by other people who were doing the same thing. So I think that's kind of the best advice in terms of seeking out opportunities. And then also just follow your curiosity, and don't get too caught up in what other people think about you. If people call you crazy, just shrug them off. Keep doing what you do.
Some really great points. I really appreciate all of that feedback. And so I guess sort of the main takeaways that I'm getting from this are just follow what you're genuinely curious and passionate about. Create the opportunities that you would be looking for as an individual, not necessarily what's already out there. And then find the people that you need to help support, not the people who are trying to hold you back.
Exactly. Exactly. And just, those steps will get you further than you can ever imagine. I mean, if I had asked myself like 6 years ago if I'd be doing all this stuff, I would have looked at you like you're crazy. But it happened, and it worked out really well. And it's because I just followed those steps. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really great advice for everybody. And
Hmm.
all right, I think that those are all of the questions that I have. So Benji, thank you so
Great.
much for joining me on here, and
My
I really
pleasure. Thank you
appreciate
for
your
having
time
me.
today.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.